It's wonderful to be with you today. I just want to give you a little background.
Please.
On what we're doing.
Yes.
One of the things I've realized is that emerging from the pandemic, there's still a great deal of unmooring, suffering I'm seeing everywhere I go. You know, if we're really honest, even business folks are saying, my bank is not working quite the same way.
Yeah.
Things are just, the genie's like not going back in the bottle, but it's unspoken. I think the rhetoric we hear these days keeps us caught in a lot of hate
Yes.
and polarization. And so we've been wondering and asking the question, how do you create a way back to healing and hope? And who are the people out there in our community that are weaving the fabric of our families, of our neighborhoods, of our society back? The honor for me was getting to spend a day on the farm on RidAll
Yay.
Green, which was actually strangely healing for me. When I listened back, the sounds, the smells, all of it came back to me.
Good.
And you realize that nature is very healing. So I'd love for you to start, maybe introduce yourself to everyone, tell us how you came to help co-found RidAll, maybe just a little bit about your background as well. Make
Okay,
it a
sure.
long story.
Make it a long story, okay. Well, I am a lifelong Clevelander. I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Warmth of Other Suns by Isabel Wilkerson, but my family is sort of that great migration story. My mother migrated here from Georgia, my father migrated here from Mississippi, and they started a life as young adults in Cleveland. And so I think about that when I tell my story, because my summers I spent in DeKalb, Mississippi, very rural part of Mississippi, where my grandparents had a very large farm. So that's really my first exposure to, wow, food tastes different when it comes out of the ground. And you know, the slower pace of a rural town, and really getting to know your family, your neighbors, you know, people really would engage you in meaningful conversation. I think I parked that way back in the back of my mind once I got older and stopped going down south. But certainly appreciated just the challenge of the migration and all the, you know, the challenges that people of color face when they arrived in places like Cleveland and Detroit and New York and, you know, pick your city. And maybe that was parked in the back of my mind as well, because, you know, you grew up in the city and Cleveland was always racially divided. You know, the east side was primarily black, the west side was primarily white. You know, I met people as a young adult that had never crossed the bridge. I was shocked that people said, you know, I've lived on the west side my entire life. I've never been to museums, and you know, and people on the east side never been to the zoo, and it's just, you know, madness. So it's like, wow, you know. So I think all of that sort of defined me in many ways, and it's probably why I decided to establish a think tank called Policy Bridge, which is now 19 years old. And we write research reports and focus on public policy ideas that might impact and improve the quality of life for people of color and other disenfranchised, you know, communities. And it was in 2009, you know, these reports bubble up in a number of ways. A lot of times I'd read something or see something and get frustrated and say, I'm going to write a report about this. But it was the foreclosure crisis of 2009 that really started to get under my skin a bit. And I kept hearing people say that as the crisis neared, that, you know, it's almost here, and this is going to be the demise of Cleveland neighborhoods, you know, when the foreclosure crisis hits. And I kind of said, well, wait a minute, Cleveland neighborhoods have been in trouble for decades. I mean, like, what do you mean this one issue is going to be the tipping, you know, it might be the tipping point, but it certainly isn't driving. There's a lot more under the surface that is driving, you know, the ills and the challenges of Cleveland neighborhoods. So you think about the population of Cleveland peaked in 1950, and every decade since we've had, you know, out-migration. And at that time, there were neighborhoods in Cleveland where every school in certain neighborhoods were failing by state standards. They were getting an F on the state report card. And you had Catholic churches pulling out of neighborhoods. You had all the YMCAs pulled out of neighborhoods. So I thought, you know, the people that have remained only remained because they didn't have the means to get out. But, you know, there had been certainly over the years an emptying out of the east side especially. But back to 2009, I guess, hearing that, and then hearing that they were projecting that 10,000 homes would be demolished as a result of the foreclosure crisis. Turns out it was 18,000 homes that were actually demolished. But at the end of our report, we always try to offer recommendations about what could be done. And one recommendation that I made was, since we know they're going to knock down that many homes and we'll have all these vacant lots, someone should be thinking proactively about what we could do or should do with all that vacant land. Perhaps we should use that land for things like an urban farm, because it would create jobs and add value and pride back to communities. So 2 of my childhood friends read that and said, oh, that's it. We're going to do an urban farm. And I said, wait, I never said I wanted to do an urban farm. I just said I thought it'd be a great idea for someone, so that's kind of how the farm, yeah. So I got myself in a lot of trouble, But we talked about it, and Damian, one of the co-founders, was a general contractor, and he said, hey, I could pull permits and build greenhouses and hoop houses. Kima Durden, at that time, was already a 20-year vegan, and he had owned a soul food vegetarian restaurant in Cleveland Heights, where he was already serving healthy food that sort of had a soul food appeal or flavor, but it was definitely vegan, vegetarian. So he said, hey, I can teach people how to cook and eat healthy. And they said, Randy, you come from a nonprofit background, so you would know how to raise money and how to create a board and all the things that we would need to do to run an organization. So we put our heads together, and next thing you know, the farm was born, and we went to the city and asked for 1 to 2 contiguous acres of land, and they kind of chuckled and said, although there are lots of vacant land or lots out there, we really rarely see contiguous. But there is one place that we can ask you to look at, and it's known as the Forgotten Triangle, which is where our farm is located. So it was a notorious illegal dumping site for decades. And the reason for that, I always point out when we do tours, is that there's 3 streets, East 81st through East 83rd. But surrounding those 3 streets, there's a lot of geographical boundaries that are pretty distinct. So you have a Conrail train line on to the east. You have a rapid transit line that runs along the back of our farm. And then on the western side of East 81st, half the block is taken up by a large manufacturing company. So those borders really kind of lock those 3 streets in. And
cue train.
Yeah, I mentioned train. That's right. It always happens when I tour on the farm too. A train comes.
I know.
Yeah.
Experience.
Yeah. So in 1979, an arsonist set a fire that burned down 29 homes on those 3 streets. So with those natural barriers that I just talked about, there were no eyes on the street. It's not like someone 2 streets over would hear something and call the police. There's no 2 streets over. That's all that's there. So today on East 83rd Street, there are 0 homes. On East 82nd Street, there are 2 homes, one of which we bought and we're in the process of renovating.
I saw that, you were renovating.
Yeah, and then East 81st Street, there's about 5 homes that have people living in them. There's probably another 5 homes that are vacant, abandoned. So there's no real community in that small little pocket. And when we arrived there in 2010, every single street light was out on those 3 streets, so pitch black. So you can imagine, burned out cars, refrigerators, furniture. We worked with the County Illegal Dumping Task Force and unearthed over 2,000 tires. Trees, knocked down trees. We cleaned up debris. I mean, it took really over 2 years just to kind of clean the place up and get rid of all this and start to kind of change the dumping behaviors. Because even today, we still have people come down and dump. The difference is we call our city council person, Richard Starr, or the some county department, and they'll within a day have it removed. And we have more eyes on the street, and we have security at night that kind of drives around. So we're able to mitigate it quite a bit. But it took years for that culture to sort of start to change, where people maybe found other places to go. The sewer district installed BioSwells. 2 years after we landed there, they won a $44 million grant for stormwater runoff. And so they dug out these huge, gouges in the earth on both sides and decorated them with plants and things, and created those bioswells. So when there's a large rain event, the water might rise up, but it'll go right back down into the sewers.
Good, which is good.
Yeah, which is great. Yeah, so it was beautiful. Beautiful for our campus to have 2 bioswells on each side of an urban farm. I mean, Yeah, you couldn't ask for more. So
was the park always there?
Great question. The park was always there. And it's really a great story about community, because it was very eerie that the first 2 years we were there, no one ever came to the park. It was empty. And again, think about the environment that I talked about, burned out cars, tires, So, and a lot of shrubbery and different types of debris, so much so that you couldn't really see what was in the woods beyond the hillside, right past the playground. So no one ever came. And former Mayor Jackson came down once and said that he personally saw to it that the park was renovated. I mean, it was a shiny park, brand new backboards and new play equipment and everything. Right. He, as a child, lived on East 83rd Street, so he had he probably played at that same spot as a kid, So he said, I really want to help, but no one felt safe. So as we started to clean it up and remove all the trash and debris, by our end of our second year, third year, you start to see a couple of families come out. By year 4 or 5, you start to see people cooking out, and then birthday parties, and and now it's just a place where you see people all the time, and so that's nice. I mean, that's bringing a community back, right? And we're very proud of that. We open up our porta potty for people playing basketball, and keep some water, and
simple things matter.
And they take it upon themselves often to pick up trash before they leave, and so you start to see those small but meaningful changes happen, in the community, which means a lot to us and a lot to the residents that live there.
It's been no small journey. 13 years go by. Tell me about your role in it, some of the moments that most stand out to you of transition that have occurred, like moments that took it from we've cleaned it up to now what?
Yeah. Wow, there are many moments. I mean, dozens and dozens of moments where you kind of say,
unearthed the street.
Right. Yeah, that would be one. Yes.
And that leads you to a new path.
That's certainly one, because that was early. We had been on the site for 2 years, and it was a warm day, unseasonably warm January day, and 55 degrees and sunny like today. And we went out and said, let's clean up the other side of the property. So we started raking and picking up, and someone yells, there's a street under here, and we, oh my God. So the Development Corporation didn't know it, and the planning director didn't. So we went back and looked at the city maps and said, oh my goodness, this was Fort Avenue that connected 82nd Street to 83rd Street, and it's been covered up for 40 years. So we took inspiration from that and said, why don't we build compost bins and start our compost operation? Because we always wanted to make our own soil, but we didn't really have a place to do it, and a lot of communities frown on, oh my God, compost, we don't want that, not my backyard kind of thing. The way we learned to make compost was really using just carbon and nitrogen. So we only use wood chips and leaf humus and those kinds of things for carbon, and then for nitrogen, only rotting fruits and vegetables. So we actually are licensed by the EPA. Our compost facility is a level 2 compost station.
Great.
So because we only use fruits and vegetables, there's never a scent. There's never a foul smell. We don't use cheeses and meats and other things that others use. And that also eliminates the problem with vermin. We have a couple of chubby groundhogs in the area, but outside of that, we can handle everything else. So
circle of life going on.
That's right. But that would be a big moment. I remember so many people that came to visit us that really made us stop and say, wow, we're really getting attention. I think it was like the second or third year, we had the chief executive chef from McDonald's Corporation. And it was kind of like, and so you might ask yourself, well, what is a guy like that, how dare he show up on an urban farm that's promoting healthy food? But he was very supportive of what we were trying to do, and he was the guy that brought the apples to the Happy Meals for kids, and he was the guy that brought the smoothies to McDonald's. So he was really saying, and the whole thing about putting calorie counts for different meals. So even in that role, he was thinking about, we don't want to be the enemy. We want to have options so that if people do dine with us, that they can come out of it with a healthy meal, right? So Marcy Kaptur, Congressman Marcy Kaptur, was so blown away and told all of her friends in Congress, you got to go to Cleveland. It wasn't even her district. But she came and said, you have to come, and she did. I mean, she was able to help other individuals from Washington come, including we had the assistant director of the USDA come, things like that. But I would also say the field trips. Interestingly enough, the first 2 years, we only had private schools knocking down our door to come and visit. So Hawken, Hathaway, Brown, US, they were coming religiously. And it was a guy named Tim Tramble, who's the current president of the St. Luke's Foundation, but at that time he was the executive director of the Burtonville Car Development Corporation, which is in charge of the area where our farm is. And he's a Cleveland School graduate like myself. So he and I kind of approached a few folks around town and said, hey, if this place is good enough for Hawken, Hathaway, Brown, and University School, why not consider, Cleveland Public Schools students? And that led to now, many schools on an annual basis bring their kids. And we have about, on average, 5,500 visitors to the farm every year, not including the one-day Fresh Fest event, which alone this year brought 9,000 people. But outside of that, we have about 5,500 visitors. 2,500 to 3,000 of them are school students, from K through 12. And one highlight I remember is a third grade class coming, and they go back to their school, and a teacher asks a little boy, African-American boy, what was your favorite part of the field trip? Right. And his response was, all the bosses look just like me. So you start to realize, like, wow, you never know how you're touching people, how you're impacting people. Obviously, the first time we did the Fresh Fest was a big event because we didn't know, man, if we were to open this place up and as a community festival, will people come? Will they see the address and turn the other way? And that first year we had close to 5,000 people. Right. And it was a big hit, and people just were looking at me saying, where am I? I live in Lakewood, but I've never felt so safe in a Cleveland neighborhood, and this is so beautiful. And so you started to see the reach of an urban farm and the importance of a place where people can come together and heal and be comfortable with each other and enjoy beauty and other things that they have in common. So that was big for us. One of the biggest moments, of course, was losing our co-founder, Damian, who passed away. This month will be the 5th anniversary. Okay. So I can't believe he's been gone that long, but he was a driving force, the guy that would tell anybody anywhere he went, if he was shopping at Home Depot, if he was dining at a restaurant, if he was walking down the street, anyone that would listen, he would talk about the RidAll. And people really were jazzed about that. People said, wow, this guy's like electric. I have to come and see it for myself. And they always would be impressed. And, he would write personal checks. He was there, 40 hours a week, donating time, and did so much, made so many friends. And then, he's gone. And we obviously all came up together from childhood, early childhood. So this is your friend since childhood, 50 years old, dies of a heart attack. Right. Which is absolutely the whole reason he wants to do this work. Right. He wished, I heard, for it to be the Walt Disney of the Disney World of urban agriculture. That's right. That's right. And that's no small thing, but he also seemed to recognize that life expectancy in the Forgotten Triangle is 20 to 30 years less than probably a mile to 2 away. That's right. And yes, that area is just fraught with higher incidences of cancer, heart disease, diabetes, obesity. That's right. One fresh food access point for every 15 fast food restaurants. Just hard for people to find their way and to find, even if they wanted to eat healthy, it's just not designed that way. So. The other thing, people always ask the question, well, where did the name RidAll come from? Yes. Right? It's an acronym. Right now. It wasn't now, originally. That's right. So I was the silent partner that helped Damian establish the RidAll Exterminating Company. And he always said, when I'm ready to figure out what I'm going to do with the rest of my life, I'll call you. So he called me one day. He was working for Orkin. And he said, I think this is what I want to do. I like, being my own boss, being able to, move around a lot, and then helping people and serving people. So RidAll Exterminating Corporation was born, and Damian landed many contracts over the years with public housing. Right. And it was there where the chord was struck for him, because he said, when you go into someone's home every week for 15 years, you start to really see what their quality of life is like. And he said, man, I can't tell you the number of kids every morning that I see eating a bag of Cheetos and a cherry pop for breakfast. And then you wonder sort of why they act out and why they have all these other issues. Well, man, that's really pretty challenging. So that was always something that bothered him, which I think helped him to understand the importance of an urban farm. But also, right before, a couple of years before we started the farm, he was involved in a study with the local nonprofit called Environmental Health Watch.
Right.
And it was a study focused on public housing and the fact that extermination services had caused many issues of asthma and things like that because they would just spray these pesticides every week and kids would get sick.
That's right.
So he worked with this Environmental Health Watch to explore alternative ways to offer exterminating services, like instead of putting down feed for mice and rats, mint oil is known to be a deterrent.
Yeah,
so,
peppermint oil.
Yeah, peppermint oil, right.
I believe cayenne pepper.
Yeah, things like that.
He's natural.
Right, so he used several natural types of things and really started to understand, it's up to us, to be more mindful as we go into these facilities to take care of the lives of the people that live there. So between those two experiences, he was just like, oh my God, this urban farm, we got to do it. We have to do this, and got very excited about it early on. So now we used to say that RidAll Exterminating would rid all of your pest woes. So then we said, well, the RidAll farm, we changed the acronym to RID would stand for Redemption, Integrity, and Determination for all mankind.
For all mankind.
For all mankind. And so we like to say we're ridding urban America, urban Cleveland, of its woes, be it hopelessness, be it toxins in the soil, be it, unemployment, be it crime, all those kinds of things,
Right.
So that's really what we try to do. There was a study done in Philadelphia that said that green spaces accounted for a 30% reduction in crime. So there is something to be said. There's, when people say, I feel something when I'm here, I'm very relaxed, I'm very calm, I kind of revert back to that study to say, it does make a difference. It's hard to be mad as hell about something when you're sitting in all this beauty and, breathing the aromas and, the colors and, the tranquility. It's what more and more of our communities need to have, which is why we do all that we can do to help other, groups around the city that are trying to acquire land to do something similar, not necessarily at our scale, because again, very few places can you amass 2 acres, and now in our case, 18 acres we control. But they still can do a lot, and there's beautiful projects out there where someone just takes a couple of lots and just converts it and
a little pocket.
Yeah, little pockets.
Pocket gardens and parks.
Yeah.
But now the science is showing, and maybe one of the blessings coming out of the pandemic is many of us discovered or rediscovered nature.
Yes. Yes.
And it's healing effects. But it takes me back to what you said originally about we lost something when we immigrated.
Yep.
Going back to the farms when you were a kid.
Right.
Forgotten Triangle is also forgotten ways.
Yes.
Of doing things.
Right.
And what I noticed on the farm is so many principles, and again, from the soil, over and over again, we heard healthy soil, healthy plants, healthy people.
Right.
They're actually profoundly sound scientifically. You do research, you look at things, and that going back to those old ways is actually a way to help heal us.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Even the sense of community, you think about what communities were like when we grew up. I mean,
That's right.
You don't quite see it that way. People are a lot more transient, I think about all the seniors in my neighborhood. It seems like they were all there all the way through my childhood, and you could talk to them, they would look out for each other, they would offer words of wisdom.
They were elders.
They were elders, yeah. They taught you what a yard was supposed to look like, and many of them had little backyard gardens and things, and those are lessons that a kid living in Cleveland today is very difficult for them to experience or to find, because so many people move so often. You never really get rooted in a particular community because of poverty and other kinds of challenges. So we missed that whole opportunity. So we like to make RidAll home for anyone that is looking for that sort of sense of community. And the best thing that we hear is people say, you know, everyone just welcomes you here, and you just feel like you belong, and you know, there's a place for you here, which is really beautiful, because you know, everybody out there needs a hug. Everybody out there needs, you know, to know like people care, and you know, people want to see them be healthy. So we talk a lot about, you know, let thy food be thy medicine. You know, those kinds of things we like to say to some of the residents. And now that we have a healthy food restaurant 2 days a week, oh my goodness, it's off the charts, because people can eat that food on a weekly basis, and they rush in every Tuesday and Friday when we're open to say, oh my goodness, Randy, I ate a tofu sandwich and it was pretty good, you know, and, and I never thought I would even try that, you know, and certainly with things like soups, where we do vegan chili and, you know, lentil soups, and people say, oh my God, this is fantastic, and people are like clamoring for it. Never thought they would even try it, you know, but they're, you know, so we're changing behaviors and building community at the same time.
At the same time, giving a way to connect.
Yes.
I want to think of, you know, for you and I, we're becoming the elders, perhaps, at our ages. We're in that in between. Tell me about the next generation. We got to spend time, you know, with Aharon, seeing the next generation, and yet he was also talking about having the students and the young people coming through and saying something that perhaps there was a time where being Black and being a farmer was a bad thing. That was something to get away from. And yet, just what you said, seeing yourself in them, this young generation, he shared that he came to this by having a gun carry, community service. But the thought that there would be role models showing a way to be a different way. Tell me about that. What do you hope for this
I hope
next generation? And it's not easy. It's never a straight path. There are good days and bad days, right?
That's right. Yeah, first of all, I hope that there are a lot more Aharons out there that can get excited about it. You know, he didn't really know what he was getting himself into.
No, he did not.
He just knew
what he wanted.
I have to do, you know, community service, and my dad started an urban farm, so I'm gonna. You know, he tells the story, he came and he thought he was going to kick back and get his hours in, and his dad was like, oh, no, you're going to work.
You're going to work.
And he started working and just fell in love with it. And spent a lot of time with Dr. Greenhand learning about plant and soil science, and the benefits of plant-based diet, and seeing the faces of people sort of as they have those eureka moments about why this is so important. And he started to study and get more involved and attuned to the work, and started being a bit entrepreneurial about what can I do that sort of reflects this next generation's view of urban farming. And so, as you know, from the oxygen dome, you know, he's really focusing on healing and those kinds of things. I see a lot of young people. I don't know to what extent they'll get excited about the pure farming, growing vegetable side of it, but there's definitely a chord struck with them as relates to an environment.
They're passionate.
They're very passionate.
And worried.
That's right. So when you start to say to them, well, trees matter. You know, we have, as you know, a tree nursery at RidAll.
The tree nursery.
And so when young people hear growing trees in Cleveland at RidAll is actually addressing an environmental justice issue. And people say, well, how so? And then you say, well, you know, the east side of Cleveland has a much more sparse tree canopy. And oh, by the way, you know, the experts say that, you know, those communities as a result of that are 10 to 15 degrees hotter in the summer months, which leads to childhood asthma. And oh, by the way, those are economically depressed neighborhoods that probably can't afford air conditioning. So now you need cooling centers for seniors that can't afford to, you know, cool their homes in a way that is comfortable for them. So that's why we have to grow these trees and plant them and really reforest that part of town. So it means for young people, it's like, yes, that's what we want to do, you know. And they hadn't really thought about it before. You know, the implications of carbon and the importance of carbon sequestration. And so we hear, and then the whole piece around trauma and healing and the hopelessness that a lot of them feel themselves as well as from their friends and family. And, you know, where do you go if you want to feel better? And That's sort of what Aharon is really taking a deep dive into. Like, can we offer? There's a guy who we know who has for years offered something called Ghetto Therapy in public housing, and they have 50 primarily women show up every week, and it's been social workers donating their time, just listening to these individuals and then giving them help and giving them direction and those kinds of things. Well, they want to have some sessions, ghetto therapy sessions at the RidAll farm, and the Dome, along with reflexology and meditation and yoga and all these things that so many people need because there's so many troubles in a place like Cleveland, and there's nowhere to run, nowhere to escape. So many people look at us as like an oasis, like, wow, this is the one place I can go and have a good meal and have a good conversation and have some peace and quiet and not feel threatened and
feel safe.
Feel safe, yeah.
And see beauty.
Yeah. So it's sad that, we're one of the last places that, that people can go for that. But I hope that there'll be a lot more of that. And it starts to spread out across the city and the nation, for that matter.
We talked about trauma and that, it never really goes away. And certainly everyone is carrying a bit post-pandemic, a lot of moral injury, a lot of people seeing things that were hard to see, experiencing that disruption. But it begins inside. So the fact that this healing, again, and that foundation is being done inside, in the neighborhood, makes all the difference. Randy, what are your thoughts about the future? You and I talked about, nonprofits are hard. There are opportunities to be entrepreneurial. Can this be an economic driver for the neighborhood? The opportunity corridors are going right by there. What are the opportunities and what are your hopes for the future? And perhaps even what can all of us do maybe to be of support, to make this idea spread? You're all over the world with this concept. I think, first of all, putting on my workforce development hat, which I've had a lot of experience with, I think that, and I said this at the very beginning of RidAll, that this might be the last best chance for workforce development opportunities in the urban core. And that's any urban core. So I've had many conversations over the last couple of years, and we actually just received a City of Cleveland grant to test this out. But I think there's a whole new sector here that we're referring to as green infrastructure. So the skills that you need for urban agriculture are certainly cousins with skills you need for landscaping, for horticulture, for urban forestry, for brownfield remediation, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to sort of group all of these and start to do training so that an individual may choose agriculture or horticulture or landscaping or urban forestry, but they're all outside. They all can be sort of mastered, with a lot of, time in the field, but you don't have to have a college degree, We don't care if you're an ex-offender or not, but I think it's a way to get people plugged into employment opportunities. And oh, by the way, be a part of the solution in their own communities. You're gonna, show those skills in the very communities where you come from, and use those skills to make money. And so I've talked to landscaping associations that are all saying, even some of the biggest landscapers out there, we are having major trouble finding people. Shortage.
And so you think about urban forestry. I mean, the plan is the Cleveland Tree Coalition wants to plant 360,000 trees over a 10-year period. Well, that's a lot of trees to plant, but it's even more trees to have to maintain because someone has to go out in the summer months, weekly basis. You have to water them, you have to prune them, you have to, and then you prep them for the summer, you prep them for the winter, So if you have thousands of trees, someone has to be moving around doing all those kinds of things. If you're repurposing vacant lots, that's a lot of time. If you're working for, a landscape or whatever the case may be, it's just, there's a lot of opportunity, we believe. So we want to maybe get people excited about. One of my colleagues at RidAll likes to say, we're making farming sexy again. It's like it's a good profession. It's there's a lot of pros to it because there is a positive connotation to feeding your community both physically and spiritually and emotionally, right? So it's not just a job, you know, and no one at RidAll feels like it's just a job. Everyone feels like it's a calling. And they all feel like they're giving something more, a lot more to the community than they're getting in the form of a paycheck. And that's a unique opportunity. I mean, I work in corporate America. People don't leave the office high-fiving that we changed the world today. You know, it's just like you're just crunching numbers, or you're, you know, trying to hit plan, and you know, and then but there is a lot of meaning in this. And when enough people tell you, I mean, last week we hosted the Mayors and Managers Association. And so it was maybe 40 or so mayors from all over Northeast Ohio, I should say Cuyahoga County, and I had a chance to talk to a lot of those mayors one-on-one, and one mayor pulls me aside and says, "Hey, I just want you to know, I grew up around the corner from here, and I just want to thank you for what you guys have done. I mean, you know, this once upon a time was a great neighborhood, and it fell on hard times for decades, but this is nothing short of miraculous what you guys have been able to do, and I want to thank you, you know."
You're growing hope.
Yes.
Another phrase I heard a lot was rose coming out of concrete.
Yes, all those are true, you know. It's,
but if you actually grew up and saw it yourself, you know the difference.
That's right.
And the dignity that this brings back.
Yes. I hope that this effort will catch fire in other parts of the country and the world, that people can see that you should be thinking about growing your own food. You should be thinking a lot more about just trying to eat healthy, and the impact of mass production of food on the environment, and the importance of environmental sustainability as we go deeper and deeper into this climate action issue and challenge. Those are all the things I think about long term. I also hope that more, I mean, if I were king for a day, we would be preparing lunches for all the schools.
Right out
of the gate. I mean, just because, I like that. Because we know kids aren't eating healthy. We've toyed with it, and for a lot of those programs, because of mass production of lunches, I think they only allot like $4 or $5 a day for lunch. Well, we can't really, you know, keep up with that kind of a budget to feed. But we're going to remain hopeful that maybe we can find a school that we can, you know, trial this, do a trial run with, and see what might happen. I also think that the farmers market that we operate in Maple Heights could become a model for urban centers across the Cleveland area and the country, because I really believe the big box grocers aren't going to return to those neighborhoods because it just doesn't make sense for them financially. If you're in a, you know, Cleveland's the second poorest city in America, number one in poverty for children. So if you plop a grocery store right in the heart of a neighborhood that is dealing with that, they're not going to be able to afford to spend at a rate that the companies will be pleased with. But if you have a small 8,000 square foot, you know, farmers market where you're primarily, you know, we don't sell any meats or proteins. We only serve fruits and vegetables, but we provide some dishes. We do in terms of having a chef on hand that will whip up, you know, here's a feature on squash. Squash is our feature, you know, vegetable this month.
How do I cook this?
Here's a soup, and here's something else that you can taste. Here's a squash risotto and a squash soup, and here's the recipe, and here's how it tastes, and it's like a totally different shopping experience, right? It was like that decades ago when I was a kid, many decades ago, but not so much today. So I think you know, offering those kinds of things, it has to be a lot more interactive. You know, we can't just expect that people are going to get this in this you know, virtual world that we're living in, where so many folks are staying home and not wanting to come out, and not wanting, you know, they'd rather DoorDash than go out and actually stand in line at a store. And so many seniors tell us the thing they love most about our store is that it's small, that they can navigate it, that it's not daunting, right? And
I have that same feeling.
And you know, we have young kids that carry their watermelons to their car for them and things like that, and they really appreciate that, you know. So people need to be reconnected to humanity in a way that again is nurturing and safe and healthy, and
connected and gives us hope.
Because we've lost that in so many ways. So those are the things I dream about, I mean, I wish that more schools would, pay more attention to these kinds of lessons and have their kids go out and experience more farms and pay more attention to, things that are happening with the climate and, things like, trees, the importance of trees, all those, that's another thing I hope for, that that's just more of a environmental stewardship, responsibility owned up by the school districts.
Okay, that's
yeah.
So for this next decade of RidAlls, how about you? You have such a prolific career. You really do.
You're very kind.
No, it's
Look who's talking.
No, but you've really continued to try to give back to the community. How is your health, and how has this affected your well-being, being a part of this? Has it changed your personal journey at all toward health? Because we all are on that journey.
I guess I'll say I haven't converted to becoming vegan, although we have a few of our folks that have been vegan for 30 years now.
Wow.
But I do have an appreciation for vegan, vegetarian dishes.
Yeah.
I've pretty much for the last 20 plus years hovered in the pescatarian space.
Yeah.
Yeah. I rarely eat meat.
Right.
That's very rare. Maybe one hamburger a year or something like that.
Right.
I don't really do it. I might cheat every now and then with a little bacon, but outside of that, everyone needs a little bacon in their life. But you get the idea. But, I am comfortable going out and ordering vegan or vegetarian dishes. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when I go to banquets and things like that, and you have to give your meal selection, I'll pick vegetarian. Just because I'm used to eating it, being around those men and women at RidAll, and the big thing is people fail to realize that you can actually get full. People think like, if you eat like a rabbit, you'll be hungry 20 minutes later. Well, not so. If you know.
So too, all the fiber, which is profoundly important.
That's right.
To our health.
So maybe 3 years before Damian passed away, we had another gentleman, David Wright, who was certainly known throughout the Cleveland region. He did all the training for the botanical gardens and worked with a lot of universities. He was just a genius at permaculture, and did a lot of work with case students on our farm site and totally redid a whole hillside that was a walking edible trail. It was beautiful. I mean, he was just he was just extraordinarily bright. But he passed away of a heart attack. For two of your close, I look at pictures with like me and Damian and him and five of us, and two of the five are already gone because of cardiovascular.
Right.
It certainly has made me think about the importance of eating healthy and exercising and all those kinds of things. So it has really made me think long and hard about just take care of yourself, and even from a mental emotional. What are you doing? Do you take time to, quote unquote, smell the roses, smell the collards, smell the, we have very reflective kind of conversations like that amongst ourselves at RidAll. So that's been something for me. But yeah, I've always tried to help the community in any way that I can. And the beauty is that you see that all these things intersect in one way or another. So. The think tank is in many ways still aligned with the urban farm, but the urban farm is now providing all sorts of activities and opportunities for other partners, and there's not many organizations out there that we haven't partnered with in some way. Now we can host special events, and we're just as an example, we're packing. We've done this now for 3 years, packing bags for expectant moms that are part of the University Hospital's Women's Center. So they want those ladies expecting to eat healthy. So they'll do certain events, and they'll give them, the takeaway would be, here's a bag of fresh fruits and vegetables, and the women loved it. So we're backed by popular demand. during COVID, you probably remember there was a COVID relief fund that many foundations in the Cleveland area came together,
Right.
and they funded many organizations. We were providing a couple hundred boxes per week that we were packaging up and distributing to veterans and into residents in that central neighborhood. And then once a week we would do a big sort of community meal in one of our greenhouses, so it was safe for people to kind of come and grab and go.
That's right.
You didn't have to be around other people, but they really appreciated the hot meal. So, you know, there's just so many ways that I've seen the tentacles of RidAll spread, and I just hope to see those continue. And you know, as I get older, and you know, I'm sure I won't be able to keep the pace of you know, working full time for a major corporation and being an officer at that corporation. You know, writing proposals. You know, managing the board, managing a lot of our strategic partnerships and relationships, and you know, it's a lot. But you know, you make a lot of friends as a result of being out there this long. So there's a lot of folks I can call on, and and I do, and they always answer, and you know, so I feel like it's really, I'm just one of many, you know, positive lights in the community. You know, there's so many people that I respect and admire because I never feel like I'm the Lone Ranger and I'm out here trying to change Cleveland. I can look around every day and see just dozens of people fighting such a good fight, and I try to encourage them to keep going, and they encourage me to keep going, you know, and together, you know, we'll get there. So
yeah, that's one thing I learned in the pandemic. There's so much more love than hate.
Yes.
And I really saw people all over Ohio rowing, and I've always felt Cleveland had a special way of rowing hard. So
that's right.
Hope to see you keep spreading that light, because I know you have.
Yes. And we did watch you every day at the RidAll farm. When you gave your updates, we were like, yeah, hang in there.
Hang in there.
Thanks for your leadership and your sacrifice. I know it was tough.
Thank you.
I mean, you could never prepare for something like that, right?
No.
I mean, yeah, you just wake up one day and you're in the seat.
Yeah, ordinary person in an extraordinary time.
Yes,
so,
yes. Yeah. But you made it look easy. So, so good for you, but I know it wasn't, so.